Picture this. You're Keir Starmer. You've just negotiated what you think is a brilliant deal to rejoin the EU's Erasmus scheme. You're feeling pretty pleased with yourself. Probably already drafting the victory tweet about putting opportunities first for young people. And then Andrew Neil, the broadcaster equivalent of a political flamethrower, shows up on X and essentially tells the entire country that you couldn't negotiate your way out of a wet paper bag. A wet paper bag. That's not just criticism, that's a verbal uppercut delivered with surgical precision. Neil's claiming that this Erasmus deal is terrible for Britain, that working people's taxes are going to fund gap year adventures in Barcelona for posh kids from wealthy families, and that Starmer's basically been taken to the cleaners by Brussels. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where we dissect the political chaos so you don't have to. Today, we're diving into this Erasmus controversy, figuring out whether Neil's absolutely right or whether Labour's actually pulled off something decent, and unpacking why this debate reveals so much about Britain's complicated relationship with Europe. Let's start with the basics, because if you're not familiar with Erasmus, you're probably wondering what all the fuss is about. Erasmus is the EU's student exchange program that's been running for decades. It allows young people to study, train, or gain work experience in different European countries. Think of it as the academic version of a gap year, except it's structured, it counts toward your degree, and it's supposed to broaden your horizons and make you more employable. Sounds great, right? Who doesn't want young people having opportunities to learn languages, experience different cultures, and build international connections? But here's where things get spicy. It costs money, a lot of money, and whether that money represents good value is where the whole argument kicks off. Britain was part of Erasmus for years when we were in the EU. Then Brexit happened, and Boris Johnson made the decision to pull the UK out of the scheme. His argument was straightforward. Erasmus didn't offer value for money and would have cost Britain a net £2 billion over 7 years. Instead, he launched the Turing scheme, named after Alan Turing, which was supposed to be Britain's homegrown alternative. The Turing scheme would send British students abroad, but wouldn't require the reciprocal arrangement where we'd also host European students coming here. Johnson's logic was that we were sending fewer students to Europe than Europe was sending to us, so we were essentially subsidizing other countries' students. Classic Brexit thinking. Why should we pay more than we get back? Fast forward to now, and Keir Starmer's government has negotiated for the UK to rejoin Erasmus as part of his big post-Brexit reset with Brussels. The deal was announced back in May, and now we're getting the details. From January 2027, British young people will be able to participate in Erasmus again. The cost? A cool £570 million for 2027 alone. That's more than £500 million in 1 year for a student exchange program. Now, Downing Street is insisting this is actually a good deal, because apparently, under default terms, Britain would have paid around £810 million, so they've negotiated it down to £570 million, which in their minds is a massive win. It's like going to a shop where everything's massively overpriced, getting a 30% discount, and then congratulating yourself on your incredible bargaining skills, while ignoring the fact that you've just spent £570 million on something you could have lived without. Now let's get to Andrew Neil's absolutely scathing assessment. He's calling this a terrible deal for the UK and making the point that extra taxes being imposed on working people are going to finance study trips to Barcelona for what he calls gap year yaws from affluent families. Yaws, that's British slang for posh, privileged young people, usually associated with private schools and trust funds. And he's not entirely wrong to raise this concern. The reality is that participation in programs like Erasmus tends to skew towards students from more affluent backgrounds. They're the ones more likely to be at universities with strong international programs, more likely to have the financial cushion to spend time abroad, even with some support, and more likely to have the language skills and cultural capital to make the most of these opportunities. So when Neil says working people's taxes are subsidizing middle-class kids' European adventures, there's a legitimate question there about who actually benefits from this spending. His other zinger, that Starmer couldn't negotiate his way out of a wet paper bag, is brutal but touches on something that's becoming a pattern with this government. Whether it's the Erasmus deal, the fishing rights agreements, or other aspects of Starmer's EU reset, there's a growing perception that Britain is giving away a lot and not getting much in return. The Conservatives have pounced on this, with frontbencher Alex Burkhardt pointing out that rejoining Erasmus was a big Brussels demand, and Starmer seemingly caved without getting anything back for our £500 million. It's like going into a negotiation, being told what the other side wants, and then just handing it over while asking for nothing in exchange. That's not negotiating, that's capitulating. But hold on, because Labour's got a defense here, and it's worth considering. Nick Thomas-Symonds, the EU Relations Minister, is calling this a huge win for young people. The government's argument is that yes, it costs £570 million, but most of that money comes back to the UK to be distributed among British beneficiaries. Plus, Britain will have the opportunity to compete for grants from a £1 billion central pot managed by the European Commission. So in theory, British institutions and students could access additional funding beyond what we're paying in. Downing Street also claims they pushed for and got a 50% discount on membership fees. If that's true, then maybe the negotiation wasn't quite as disastrous as Neil suggests. Here's where we need to cut through the spin from both sides and look at what's actually happening. The £570 million price tag is real. That's money coming from British taxpayers. The question is whether we're getting £570 million worth of value in return. Labour says yes, because British students get access to opportunities across Europe, British universities benefit from incoming European students and staff, and there are intangible benefits like cultural exchange and international collaboration. But Conservatives and critics like Neil say no, because we're paying significantly more than the program's worth. The benefits accrue mainly to a relatively small number of privileged students, and we could achieve similar outcomes through the Turing scheme at a lower cost. The challenge with evaluating this is that both sides are partly right. Erasmus does provide genuine opportunities for participating students. If you're a young person who gets to spend a semester at a Spanish university or do an internship in Berlin, that's potentially life-changing. You learn a language, you build networks, you gain independence, and you put something impressive on your CV. Those are real benefits. But Neil's also right that these benefits are not evenly distributed. A working-class kid from a struggling comprehensive school in a deprived area is far less likely to participate in Erasmus than a middle-class student at a Russell Group university. So when you're asking working people to pay higher taxes to fund this, you can understand why they might feel like they're subsidizing opportunities for people who already have plenty of advantages. There's also the broader political context here that we can't ignore. Starmer's entire approach to the EU has been to pursue what he calls a reset, trying to smooth relations with Brussels after years of Brexit acrimony. That sounds sensible on paper. Britain and the EU are geographic neighbors, major trading partners, and natural allies on security and foreign policy. Having a functional relationship makes sense, but the problem is that every time Starmer makes a concession or agrees to something Brussels wants, it looks like Britain is being taken advantage of. The fishing rights deal was criticized for giving away too much. Now the Erasmus deal is being framed the same way. And when you're consistently accused of being a soft touch in negotiations, eventually that perception hardens into conventional wisdom. The wet paper bag comment from Neil is particularly cutting because it plays into existing doubts about Starmer's negotiating ability. He's not exactly known for being a hard-nosed, take-no-prisoners dealmaker. He's more of a cautious, legalistic, process-oriented politician. Those qualities can be valuable in some contexts, but international negotiations often require a willingness to play hardball, to walk away from bad deals, and to extract maximum value for your side. If the perception takes hold that Starmer simply agrees to whatever Brussels wants in the name of maintaining good relations, he's going to get hammered domestically, especially for Brexit supporters who already think rejoining anything EU-related is a betrayal. Let's also talk about the opportunity cost here, because £570 million is no pocket change. That's money that could be spent on NHS services, schools, infrastructure, or keeping taxes lower. In an environment where labor's already imposing tax increases on working people, as Neil pointed out, spending over £500 million on a student exchange program is going to be a tough sell for many voters. You can't simultaneously tell people that tough choices are necessary, that there's no magic money tree, that everyone needs to tighten their belts, and then spend £570 million on Erasmus. Well, you can, but don't be surprised when people get angry about it. The comparison with the Turing scheme is also important. Boris Johnson's replacement for Erasmus was specifically designed to be more cost-effective and more focused on British priorities. It sends British students to universities worldwide, not just in Europe, and it doesn't require the reciprocal arrangement where we'd also host European students coming here. Johnson's logic was that we were sending fewer students to Europe than Europe was sending to us, so we were essentially subsidizing other country students. Classic Brexit thinking. Why should we pay more than we get back? And let's be honest about who's going to Barcelona for their Erasmus year. Neil's comment about gap year yaws from affluent families is deliberately provocative, but it's grounded in reality. The student who studies Spanish literature at the University of Barcelona is far more likely to be called Olivia or